Welcome back to Republican Roundtable. My name is Mark Sullivan. I'm your host tonight, and my co-host is Dr. Stephen Darrow.
Mark, it's great to be back with you.
And good to have you back with us.
Thank you.
And our honored guests tonight are, first of all,
Anja
Anja Kroll,
yes.
right, with the West Metro Young Republicans. Okay, and Kip Christianson.
Correct.
You're going to have to give your...
Sure, I do some work as an entrepreneur. I'm an activist for the Republican Party. I am the deputy chair of West Metro YRs and involved in a bunch of other ways.
I know we had all kinds of stuff on the screen.
All sorts of stuff.
I wasn't sure where you fell in on the hierarchy.
I'm a cornucopia of political.
Well,
Kip's a man of many talents.
The Renaissance man.
Welcome to our madhouse.
Yeah. And our wonderful historian, Anja.
Yes.
Thank you.
And let's start out with Anja.
Okay.
Okay, tell us a little bit about yourself and how you
right.
got involved in politics and Young Republicans and...
All right. Well, I am proudly from generations of entrepreneurs, and so I guess in some ways small business has always been a really big issue for me, and my parents, were always concerned with how the government could help or hinder the progress of business.
Yeah, they do a real good job at that too, yeah. Both ways.
My earliest memories getting really involved in politics was helping put in signs for several different candidates. I was probably like 8 or 9 years old, and then I just fell in love with it then. Debates at the dinner table. I ended up studying U.S. constitutional history and have been involved in different ways ever since I was in high school. So.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
And you're on the Young Republican board as well?
Yes, I'm currently on the state executive board of the Minnesota Young Republicans. Kip and I are just starting off our own chapter of the West Metro Young Republicans, and
Awesome.
It's kind of exciting.
And Kip, tell us about yourself too. You and I have appeared together in different venues, but this is your first appearance on our Republican Roundtable show.
Absolutely. I grew up here in Minnesota. Was born here in just 1990. I'm a young punk, but I grew up and traveled with a wonderful little choir when I was very young. Got to Europe and started seeing that the world elsewhere was different and that America was special. Anyway, that led me to really have some aspirations for being involved, fixing, changing this country based on our traditions, growing it into what we're supposed to be. So went off to college, went to Harvard University out in Cambridge, Massachusetts, came back, chose not to go the normal Wall Street and consulting route, and got back here to try and come back and help fix this state.
The heartland.
And build the homeland.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I like one thing that you pointed out. You said you traveled overseas.
Yeah.
And you saw what it was like over there.
Sure.
And I know my days, I was in the Navy, went overseas, and not that Europe and some of those countries are so terrible, but when you look at a lot of what they consider poverty over there, what they, their standard, living standard, you really appreciate what we have here and what even the potential yet of this country can be. And I mean, it's something I wish everyone could do that, really experience, somewhere other than here, and I think they'd appreciate much more what we have.
Yeah, I actually, at one point, sorry if I can interrupt, I lived in France for 2 years, and I had a very similar experience. I lived in the north of France, which is a really beautiful part of the country, but also has the highest unemployment rate, and a lot of people are living in poverty there.
France has a very high unemployment rate.
Yes, they do, and there it was close to, I think it was close to 20% for certain demographic groups. But I have to say, I've never seen so many able-bodied young people not working, because in a lot of ways they didn't have the incentive to, I was working as an English teaching assistant, and I actually made less on their minimum wage than they do on the SMEEK. I don't know what the equivalent would be, but living off the government And
they've got a very prolific social support program over there that literally almost pays you not to work.
Yes, exactly.
It sounds familiar, doesn't it?
Yeah.
And I moved there when I was 24, and I was like,
At
where's the
one point,
incentive
we really
to
want
work?
to start ranting and raving here.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Though.
I was 24 years old, and I really realized not just what I'd learned, growing up and coming from a hardworking family in school, but firsthand with my neighbors there. I saw that they had no incentive to get out and work.
Yeah. So Anja, Kip, you guys have both been overseas. How do you, reach out to the young people here? And, if France is having that appeal of, the people not having that incentive to work, how do we convince people that these entitlements that are being proposed by the government, to have kind of this safety net, how do you inspire people to buck that trend and go to the Republican Party?
I think this new century that we're in is the century of storytelling and then the century of wide-ranging personal experience. If you can experience the life story of someone else in a broad way, not just remain confined to your hometown that you grew up in, get out, go see the rest of the world. You have a much better opportunity for empathy, a much better opportunity for sympathy, and you put that in the context of understanding and analysis of the rest of what you observe, and you're able to, with a little bit more critical analysis, see where some people's solutions, propositions, might be great, but where others might fall short. And I think each of these experiences of living in a different country. We lived in host families as choir boys when we were just 7 through 12. One of my hosts in what was formerly Eastern Germany in the early 90s and late 90s, one of our host families sat us boys down to feed us. And throughout these 3 or 4 days that we were staying with them, they all sat around the table and watched us eat. And we thought that they were eating at some other time in the day. No. They were just putting the food on the table to feed their hosts and going without for the days that we were in their home. Wow. That's a world that we can't, even those in Minnesota who do struggle the most, can't imagine a world like that.
Well, I know, especially when right after the two Germanys were united again, East and West, I know there was a big differential in the quality of life, the standard of living between the two sides, and it took a long time to bring East Germany up to what West Germany.
Yeah. Now we talk about those two distinctions.
But still, even as such, I mean, even today, I mean, Germany's probably one of the best economic nations over there.
Yeah. East and West Germany, North and South Korea, sure, those are distinctions. Right. But we also have to realize that there are problems right here at home.
Well, and just to go back to what Steve was asking, which is how we reach out to young people.
Yeah.
I would say, you were thinking about traveling in space. I would say let's travel in time.
Correct.
And I would reach out to young people and, in a similar way, say, hey, you know what? We think that living conditions are hard for our people now, and even in the lowest economic groups, and which I have at some point in my life been a part, right. And I've experienced lots of different, personally. So I can empathize with those experiences, but I think we need to look also in the past and see, hey, you know what? The people the programs that we have right now in place, many of them that, Social Security and a lot of those things, they're not even 100 years old. And we think that these are the standard, and that's what a government has to contribute to a people. And we forget that really people for thousands of years were self-reliant and hardworking, and there was never a guarantee that they were going to have a successful or even happy life. When the Founding Fathers wrote the Declaration of Independence, they didn't say life, liberty, and happiness. They said the pursuit of happiness. And that's what we have to get young people to empower themselves and believe in, that, you know what, if I want to be happy and truly have a purpose in life, the things that I get out of this life, I don't want them to be easy. I want to work hard for that, and I want to do something that doesn't just help me and my family, but I can leave something behind for other people around me now and also in future generations.
Right.
Yeah.
We have to remember now, like you mentioned, like the Social Security has not been around that long. Well, Social Security, when it was originally brought forth, Franklin Roosevelt, was so that widows of workers would have some income to live on, of workers who were killed on the job. And since then, it has become literally a retirement plan. It has become
One which-
support
Yeah.
for disabled. Just start naming the
Yeah.
different classes now that are
And one
dropped
which
into
really
Social
our
Security.
generation, they are saying, whoever they is, there isn't even a guarantee that we'll ever see what we're paying into that
Yeah.
now. So,
Statistically, the
yeah.
ratio of
Right there. I'm
workers.
trying to think. The recent figures are Social Security is going to go broke in
Office of Management and Budget says
2030, something
2035.
that-
Yeah.
And I have a young cousin who's starting out as a financial planner, trying to help people look into the future and do retirement savings and stuff like that. I think we forget that you can have a savings account on your own, and we don't necessarily have to pay into government to allocate our funds, but we can make those
Well,
decisions
there
on our
are
own.
numerous retirement plans that are out there that actually, in a sense, the government backs to the degree that they're at least, you can put tax-free dollars into it now, and then you don't pay taxes on it until you're eventually pulling it out later on in life. That really are excellent ways to fund a retirement. You cannot count on Social Security alone.
Yeah.
I remember my parents, that's what they kind of planned on. They found out that no, you can't do it. You have to have something besides Social Security. And then if it ever goes broke and defaults, you are going to have something besides Social Security.
Well, and there's a reason they ask you what kind of assets do you have, your house or your car, or, back in the day it was how many cows do you have, because in the event of, a drought and the crops are all bad, you'd have to sell your 3 of your 4 cows and hopefully.
In many cases,
Exactly.
you bought a,
That was your
you bought
savings.
a house, you paid the house off after 20 years, you did the old Bertie the mortgage routine, and then you held on to it because that was your retirement account in many cases.
Yeah.
That's what you retired on. And then going back to some of the other programs you mentioned, like the welfare programs, everything that's brought in with the war on poverty and the Johnson administration. Most of those programs were designed as stopgap measures, something to get people over a hard time in life, and then back on their feet, and then let them move on. Not lifestyle programs as they're being used in many cases.
Well, and
now,
we
where
see-
you have
we-
multi-generations.
Well, we see that kind of happening with the Affordable Care Act, and that's a fear that, could people start saying, well, we can't take that away, and I'm not advocating for some of the great benefits it provides for some people in need, but it needs to be drastically modified,
Modified.
drastically
Care Act
modified to deal with some of the
in
problems.
and of itself isn't a bad idea. We're okay. Everyone has access to medical care. That's
Right,
great.
right, access,
But everything that was promised on the ACA,
yeah,
or Obamacare, however you want to call it,
yeah,
has been one big. Let's face it, it's been a big lie.
right,
Prices, costs have been going up and up and up and up. You have not been able to keep your own doctor.
oh yeah, my personal doctor's clinic closed because of the
et cetera,
Affordable Care Act,
et cetera.
so,
Every promise that was made
Yeah.
has either been broken or never came to fruition.
Yeah.
I
never
can
came
actually
to
speak
pass.
to that personally. 5 years ago, while I was living in France, actually, I was walking across the street and I was struck by a car. I broke my spine, and I have a lot of nerve issues because of it. I mean, not just nerve issues,
Right, well,
musculoskeletal problems, you name it, still to this day, and for the rest of my life. And as soon as Obamacare went into effect, my bills flipped. I mean, some of them, there were some good things to it, but most of them just got more expensive. And they said that it is the young people, here, back to that, how
Yeah.
do you reach out to young people? We're the ones that are paying for a lot of those differences.
Yeah.
And paying into Social Security, paying into higher rates into insurance because we're healthy.
But Anja,
all of
that's a
us.
good
Yeah.
point to emphasize, though, because the
I'm
point
paying
of the
higher
Affordable
bills,
Care
yeah.
Act was to help benefit the people with chronic conditions, in your case, the pain pain issues, where a lot of insurance companies were denying people, considering them pre-existing conditions. And so from your
Well, they were
story,
also talking to where healthcare was, not affordable, health insurance was
Right.
not affordable, unless
Yeah.
you were getting it through a job.
yeah.
Well, look at what you've got now. Everyone's required to have health care. They said, okay, well, in fact, you get everyone insured, it's going to bring the price down. And all it's done is gone up and up and up and up and up.
You
Because
can't possibly
not
insure
only are
more
they
people for less
covering-
money.
Yeah.
Covering all the ones that were, in a sense, some bad risks, et cetera. But they're also adding on, well, you have to cover this, you have to cover that, you have to cover this. I mean, all kinds of just I'm sorry, foolish things that, for everyone and anyone, from
Yeah.
wigs to you name it.
I-
You have to cover this under health care. That raises the cost. I'm sorry, I don't care how you say it. It costs more money. If it costs more money, they got to charge you more for the insurance.
Kip, what
This,
was your
this is
point?
where we young millennials need to step in, step up, and ask the hard questions. Think outside the box, and think about those retirement plans that you spoke about. Those retirement plans, the government-funded ones, whether it's something where it's tax deferred or whether those are going to necessarily be means tested. The money isn't there to run it any other way. The money isn't there to run Social Security or this health care plan any other way. They say they get more people insured for less money. How is that possible? It's not. In Minnesota here, we had a beautiful medical health care system. Both of my parents are nurses. We had a beautiful system where you could be seen that day, that afternoon, anywhere in the state. It was really, really good for anybody that wanted to be insured on that market. What we have now, premiums have gone up 40% for people under 35 across Minnesota, especially outstate. Those premiums are skyrocketing in this state, and that's unacceptable. We can't allow ourselves to get shackled to this. Now, from a perspective,
It's almost like they designed the program to fail.
no, they did.
Yeah.
Because
you wonder.
And
You've
I'm,
got-
you know,
you've
I
got an
have a whole new
answer.
set of words, but everyone used to point, okay, look how great the Canadian healthcare system is. But you look at the Canadian healthcare system, people are dying waiting for CAT scans and everything else,
My-
because
my-
by the time they finally get one,
My cousin's a
six machines
middle
in
school
the
teacher,
whole
and one of
country type
one
thing.
of her students had
By the
Dave.
time they get some of this medical testing done and discover what's wrong with them, it's already progressed too far. They're got 1 foot in the grave
Yeah,
already.
my cousin's a middle school teacher, and one of her students had headaches for 6 months and had to wait 6 months to get a CT scan of the head. Now they're in rural Canada, but
Okay,
nonetheless, took tons of
I
appeals.
kind of like to move on. We're getting hung up
Yeah.
in healthcare here.
But Anja, so a little bit about the. You guys brought up a great point about the social situation living abroad. All right,
Sure.
and one thing that I wanted to see what your thoughts are is I'm a volunteer for 2 different homeless programs at my church. One that is a shoe ministry, where you give out a voucher to people and they get a shoe voucher to go to Kmart, and Kmart's very generous to cooperate with this program through St. Vincent de Paul. And but they have a $30 voucher, and they can only get a certain type of shoe, and they can't get anything different.
No high heels?
Once a year they can get a shoe. And then I also volunteer with a homeless family program where we host in the church basement homeless families with the goal to get them on track within 3 to 6 months. And I do this 3 times a year, and only once have I ever seen the same homeless family come back 3 months later, and they actually were moving into a home the next day. All right, so 3 months and 1 day for them. But it's one that creates independence and allows them any money they receive during a job during the day, they can then save to make a deposit for a rent apartment. And I guess, what are your thoughts about, and Kip, how do you inspire people to look at those 2 differences in the entitlements and say, look, with government, you're going to have this, potential limitation. You could be provided, but you'll have this kind of generic.
I would
commodity
definitely,
level stuff.
I would definitely say to that, I have a couple thoughts. One, I think that in our society, we've become so dependent on government to make changes for us, that we forget that individual organizations can do it on their own, and we forget that there are religious groups or just, any interfaith charity or whatever that reaches out to these communities, and as they have for centuries, trying to help people get better and get on their feet, and with a sort of program that encourages them to keep trying and then also to save without depending on some institution like our government for the rest of their lives. There's also so much bureaucracy with government that I think there are a lot of people who fall through the cracks, like a lot of homeless people who maybe don't even think to go to a social worker in the county office and say, how can you help me get a home for my children? Or, where can I get some help for these medical issues I have, or especially for the mentally ill? They're not going to think to go and fill out, thick stacks of paperwork to get help from the government. And those are the organizations that actually go out and find people that need help and reach out to them without some government telling them that they have to do that.
Okay.
So I think those are the 2 points I also wanted to say. In that same way, here we are looking at, it's a little side topic, but wage increases and minimum wage.
Yeah.
Look at, was it Chipotle that just on their own said, we want to have pensions for our employees, whether they're, and insurance, whether they're full-time or part-time. They did that without the government telling them to do that. So I think we need to stop in general looking just to our government to make people's lives better or help them when they're in need.
We need to look not to our government for that help. We need to look to the government to free the reins for independent organizations.
Exactly.
The reason we don't see social organizations helping out the homeless as much as you would want them to, the reason we don't see that is because, for example, I worked at a homeless shelter out in Boston. It was illegal for restaurants and for our university's food service to donate all of the extra food, Rubbermaid buckets full, for every little tiny dining hall that only serves 300 people. I have watched them carry plates of bacon out and throw them in the compost heap.
That is so
That
sad.
it's disgusting. It's despicable. I tried to fight them at the State House in Massachusetts. They won't hear anything of it because there's some food safety service. It's a question of insurance. No, it's not. It's not, and it can't be.
It's government getting in the way.
They're blocking private solutions from being an option, and this is happening across the board.
Okay, how do we get the word out about what Republicans stand for?
Never stop talking about it.
Okay.
Yeah, don't be intimidated by.
I know, Anja, you and I, just before the show, we talked just a bit, and we got talking about the what do you call it? The immigrant minority, minorities out there, which I would imagine you're talking to everything from the Hispanic,
I'm talking about
Somali to,
everybody. I'm talking about Eastern
Europe.
Europeans who have white skin
Yeah.
that we sometimes forget are also minorities,
Yeah.
I'm so sick and tired of growing up in the 90s and going through school with it beaten into our heads that
And-
minorities are just racial
Well,
groups.
the DFL traipse into these
sick of it,
groups
yeah.
and they say, okay, Republicans are for big business, they just want to keep me down. We are for the little guy. And you really start talking to a lot of these groups, and most of them are raised, their basic lifestyle, everything that they know that they come from, all their basic values are basic Republican values. Most of them are businessmen. They want to go. They don't want to be on welfare. They want to go out, start a business, earn a living, improve the lot for their family. They're family oriented.
At how many of those meetings have they ever heard an opposition argument? The DFL, the labor unions, the organizers show up everywhere. That's
Right.
how the Republican Party flipped Western metro parts like Wright County. Early 90s, Wright County was a DFL area, as surprising as that might be
Really?
to
Because I'm new to
anybody.
this state. I didn't know
As
that.
surprising as that might be to anybody. The organizers, the people that flipped that area, went in and showed up at every single meeting. If there was a funeral, they had someone there. They had someone there comforting the family. If there was a party, if there was a graduation party that was open, they'd have someone there. business parties and stuff like that, the Chamber of Commerce, churches, show up, be there, be present, and just be someone who they can talk to. We're losing personal interaction, we're losing personal experience, and when their activists show up at these meetings, all they have is whatever they say. They never have heard a contrary argument. That's on us. It's on us for not going out and not just being the ones who, as I said earlier, never stop talking about it. We need to never stop acting it. We need to never stop walking it. We need to be on the ground, in the cities, under the bridges, helping people, doing the things that we believe are actually the way to fix it.
What I keep remembering is a gentleman that I knew was a bus driver, school bus driver, and he was down in the Riverside area, Smalley neighborhoods down there. And I remember him telling me that one of the people who got on his bus said, okay, I'm going to be taking my citizenship test, whatever, I'm going to be getting my citizenship, and then I'll be able to go out and I'll be able to vote Democratic. And he just kind of like, what, just a second, you believe in this, don't you? And being able to go out and start a bit, well, and he starts going down, taking down the points. He says, that's not Democrat. Those aren't DFL values. Those are Republican values. And this woman was just, oh my God,
Yeah.
And it kind of opened her eyes, got her thinking.
Well,
Yeah.
if you think about it, it goes back.
And then later on, she did switch over. Did come back and say, you were right. I should be a Republican, not a Democrat.
Yeah.
But the DFL, the activists go into the areas, and once again, like I said, it's okay. Republicans are for the big guy; they just want to keep you down. We're for the little guy. In reality, the DFL wants to keep him down because as long as they keep him down.
That goes back over 150, more than 150 years to Tammany Hall. And things even before that where, like you said, Kip, it's almost on us, the Republicans, for not showing up and not getting those people, because with the Democrats 150 years ago, right as soon as those immigrants came off the boat at Ellis Island, they were there saying why they should vote for them. And, kind of almost shame on us as Republicans for not also being there. I think there were some kind of slimy things that happened with the Democrats. They made promises and said, I'll get this person, a job here if you vote us into office. And so it's kind of slimy. But I think there are a lot of ways that Republicans can legitimately and honorably reach out to immigrants and help them realize that their values are in line with ours.
We're in the last couple of minutes of the show here. What I want, from Kip and you, Anja, is kind of real quick. What's the one message you really want to leave us with? What's the one message that
a take-home point for the viewers?
I would say
get active.
I would say if Republicans want to get young people, we need to freshen our image up and reach out to everybody, not just young people, not just old, the typical Republicans. But we need to remember that Republicans stand with limited government. And a lot of us have conservative social values, a lot of us have conservative fiscal values, but remember that we believe in limited government because we want the individual to make the difference.
Have hope. Don't give up. The future is not already written. Join each other. We are out there. We're not just islands on our own. Join each other. Go out. Join the fight. And do it with us.
I can't say it any better. And with that, thank you very much for joining us. We'll see you on the next episode.
Thank you.